A cruel CEO cuts workers' pay to buy a private jet. The next day, the plane goes down in flames. Marcus Bellemeade strode into the executive suite of Paragon Industries, his polished shoes clicking on the marble floor. At 42, he was the youngest CEO in the company's history, having clawed his way to the top through ruthless ambition and cunning. As he settled into his plush leather chair, Marcus turned his attention to the financial reports spread across his mahogany desk. Profits were up 15% from last quarter, but it wasn't enough. He needed more power, more prestige, more wealth to fulfill his greatest desire, a gleaming new private jet to whisk him away to exclusive islands and ski chalets, elevating him into the rarefied world of the uber-rich. A sharp knock at the door interrupted his musings. "Enter," Marcus commanded. His HR director Veronica stepped in, her face a mask of composure. "Sir, we need to discuss employee compensation. Morale is low after the last round of layoffs and pay cuts. People are struggling." Marcus waved a dismissive hand. "The employees should be grateful to still have jobs in this economy. I don't have time for their whining. I have a company to run. An empire to build." Veronica shifted uneasily. "But sir, if we don't retain top talent, anyone can be replaced," Marcus snapped. "Now get out of my office. I have real work to do." As the door clicked shut behind Veronica, Marcus allowed himself a smug smile. These workers were mere cogs in his machine, easily discarded. And soon, he would leave them all far behind, untethered by their petty concerns, soaring high in his private jet. Let them eat cake, he thought to himself, then returned his focus to the glowing spreadsheets of his self-made success. In the gray cubicle maze several floors below the executive suite, Lena Novak blinked back tears of frustration, staring at the email that had just landed in her inbox. 20% pay cut across the board, it stated in cold corporate speak, with a vague reference to business priorities as justification. Lena took a deep, shaky breath. At 35, she had dedicated the last decade of her life to Paragon, working late nights and weekends, sacrificing time with family and friends. She believed in the company's mission, in what they were building together. But this latest blow felt like a betrayal. How was she supposed to make ends meet now? Pay her ailing mother's medical bills? Save anything for the future? Lena thought back to her childhood, growing up in the tight-knit neighborhood of Riverdale. It was a humble place, where neighbors looked out for each other in tough times, shared what little they had. Her best friend Mila still lived there, running the local community center that had been a refuge for them as lonely, imaginative kids. Mila had chosen a different path, one of service and connection rather than climbing corporate ladders. Lena suddenly longed for that sense of rootedness, of belonging to something greater than herself. She looked around at her coworkers, seeing her own shock and devastation mirrored on their faces. Something had to change. They couldn't let one man's greed and ego destroy everything they had worked for, crush their dignity and hopes. Lena didn't know what the answer was yet. But as she reached for her phone to call Mila, she felt the first sparks of determination kindling in her heart. Lena pulled open the weathered door of the Riverdale Community Center, breathing in the familiar scents of lemon cleaning spray and the faint sweetness of Mila's signature snickerdoodle cookies. Her best friend looked up from stacking plastic chairs, her face lighting up in a tired but genuine smile. "Lena, I didn't expect you on a weeknight. Don't you have some big corporate world to conquer?" Mila teased. Lena collapsed into a chair with a sigh. "The only thing being conquered is my will to live." Marcus announced another massive pay cut today. Said it was to fund business priorities, which apparently translates to his dream of owning a private jet. Mila let out a low whistle. "He's really going for Cartoon Villain of the Year, isn't he?" "I'm so sorry, Lena. That's awful. I just feel so powerless, you know? Like nothing I do matters to him. We're all just disposable." Mila squeezed her shoulder. "You are anything but disposable. None of you are. That man has no idea the kind of community he's messing with." Lena looked at her friend quizzically. "What do you mean?" I mean that this neighborhood knows how to come together and fight for what's right. We've done it before, saving this very community center from greedy developers, unionizing the grocery store workers. Change happens when people find their collective power. Lena nodded slowly, pieces starting to click into place. I want to believe that. I think I need to. Stay for dinner tonight, Mila urged. I'm making chili, and I have a few folks coming over who I think you need to meet. People who might help shine a light in all this darkness. Lena hesitated only a moment before agreeing. She knew the way forward wouldn't be easy. But here, among the scuffed linoleum and peeling murals, a fragile hope was taking root. As the rain pattered on the flimsy plastic over Marcus's head, he surveyed his sprawling new estate from beneath a contractor's makeshift tent. Hard hat emblazoned with the dealership's logo, gifted to him by a fawning sales manager, Marcus ignored the mud which encased his Italian loafers, picturing instead the sleek lines of the latest Gulfstream model he would soon land on the custom airstrip behind his new vacation cottage. The contractor, Jeff something, clearly awed in his presence, was rattling on about permits and easements and adjusted timelines. Marcus cut him off with an impatient chopping gesture. I don't want to hear excuses. I paid you an obscene amount of money to make this happen on my timeline. Whatever obstacles are in your way, bulldoze through them. Grease the right palms, or twist the right arms. Just get it done. Jeff swallowed hard and nodded. Yes, sir, Mr. Bellamy. We'll make it happen. Marcus gave a curt nod of dismissal and squelched his way back to the waiting town car. Once inside, he allowed himself a brief grimace at his ruined shoes before reaching for the crystal tumbler of scotch that was always kept chilled and ready for him. He closed his eyes and tipped back a generous sip, the liquid firing down his throat and into his veins. Jeff's obsequiousness and the thrum of undeclared money flowing to accelerate his dream were twin pleasures warming his blood. Soon, he would step onto that sleek jet staircase and leave all the inconvenient mundanities of running a company far below. The employees could grumble all they liked. In the end, they were replaceable ciphers, and he would always fly above. Smiling, Marcus rolled down the privacy screen. Back to the office, he commanded the driver. It's time to prepare for takeoff. The scent of spices and simmering tomatoes enveloped Lena as she stepped into Mila's cozy kitchen. Her friend was tossing a vibrant salad at the counter, laughing at something one of their dinner companions had said. Lena's eyes widened slightly as she took in the eclectic group assembled. There was Mateo, the soft-spoken young man who ran the Riverdale Community Gardens, Olivia, a retired schoolteacher whose gray hair framed a face etched with smile lines, and Rashid, the intense labor organizer Mila had mentioned, still wearing a Union-strong button on his flannel shirt. Mila greeted Lena with a one-armed hug, then turned to face the group. Everyone, this is Lena's my dear friend and one of the most brilliant minds to come out of our little hood. She also happens to work for Marcus Bellamy. Rashid let out a low whistle. My condolences, he said, not entirely joking. Lena gave a rueful smile. Believe me, they're accepted. As bowls of chili were ladled out and hunks of bread passed around, the conversation flowed easily, laughter mixing with shared stories of the neighborhood's scars and triumphs. Mateo shared his vision for expanding the gardens into a full urban farm, while Olivia recounted how she'd helped 3 generations of kids learn to read against tall odds. Warmed by the food and camaraderie, Lena found herself opening up about the pay cuts, the callousness with which Marcus treated his employees. It's like he sees us as expendable, just numbers on a spreadsheet, she sighed. Rashid leaned forward intently. But you're not expendable. None of you are. Your labor, your humanity, have value that can't be stolen away by one man's selfishness. Rashid's right, Olivia chimed in. And the beautiful thing is, you're not alone. This community has your back, just like you've had ours. We've fought back against greed and injustice before, Mateo added. Saved this neighborhood from being fractured and sold off. If we could do that, surely we can find a way to curb Bellamy's rapacity. As the conversation swirled with possibilities, Lena felt something shifting inside her, fear and helplessness transmuting into cautious determination. She was a child of Riverdale, too. And if there was one thing this place had taught her, it was how to grow seeds of change in harsh concrete. Marcus Bellamy smirked as he snapped his laptop shut, satisfaction surging through his veins better than any drug. On his screen, the specs for his new Gulfstream G700 shone sleek and inviting, all clean lines designed to slice through the air and carry him far above the chattering hordes. He spun in his chair to take in the glittering Manhattan skyline, reveling in the power rush of being on the cusp of his greatest material conquest. Some men collected women, some men scored touchdowns, but Marcus collected the trappings of wealth, the heady high of looking down on a world of ants and knowing he could grind them under a handcrafted heel. His moment was interrupted by the buzz of his assistant over the intercom. "Sir, you have a, delegation here to see you. From the employee union." Marcus scowled. "Tell the whiners that labor relations deal with their petty concerns. I have a plane to catch." "They're rather insistent, sir." And there's quite a crowd gathered. It seems to be growing. For a split second, Marcus felt a twinge of uncertainty, but he quickly crushed it under years of practiced arrogance. "Call security. I'm leaving, and I expect them to disperse before I get downstairs. I won't tolerate insubordination." Without waiting for a response, Marcus swept his monogrammed briefcase off his desk and strode towards his private elevator, already imagining champagne at 30,000 feet. No rabble, no matter how vocal, would clip these wings. Down in the marbled lobby, Lena steeled to herself as she emerged from the restless crowd of Paragon employees and community members who had answered her call to action. Rashid and Mateo flanked her, a united front against the suddenly uncertain-looking security guards. They had spent late nights at Mila's kitchen table strategizing, poring over employee contracts, parsing legal aid resources, and debating the merits of strikes, slowdowns, or good old-fashioned sit-ins. In the end, they'd agreed. The time had come to confront Marcus Bellamy directly, to demand what was rightfully theirs with the unified voice of the workers who kept his shiny empire afloat. Energy pulsed through the crowd, but Lena knew it was fragile, an ember that needed to be kindled carefully lest it gutter out under the cold reality of the power imbalance. Marcus held the keys to their livelihoods, and for many, walking out meant risking the ability to keep food on the table. "Remember," Rashid had said to her that morning, gripping her shoulders, "there is strength in solidarity. Bellamy wants you atomized, too scared to link arms. Show him what real teamwork looks like." Now, as she prepared to step forward and face down her sneering boss, she thought again of what Mila had said about how small acts accumulated into tidal forces. About how even a weed could crack concrete if it found the right fissure. Lena drew herself up to her full height and fixed her eyes on the private elevator, where Marcus would surely emerge at any moment, confident in his ability to bypass such trivial matters as basic human decency. Around her, the crowd began to chant, a full-throated chorus that vibrated through the sterile corporate air, "People over profits. People over profits." Lena raised her fist and lent her voice to the roar, determined that today, the weed would become a battering ram. The chants of the crowd reverberated behind the polished brass of the elevator doors as Marcus jabbed the door close button with increasing vehemence. Something akin to panic was clawing at the back of his throat, and he didn't care for the sensation. He had expected security to disperse the upstarts quickly, not be cowed by their kumbaya fetching. Wasn't that what he paid them outrageous sums for? To keep the riffraff in line so he could focus on what really mattered. As if summoned by his thoughts, his cell phone buzzed with an incoming call from Jeff the contractor. Marcus snatched it up with a snarl. "Please tell me the jet is fueled up and ready for wheels up. I have a sudden urge to be 5,000 miles away from this godforsaken city." There was an uncomfortable pause on the other end of the line. "About that, Mr. Bellamy." Jeff's voice had a nervous tremor that set Marcus's teeth on edge. "We've hit a bit of a snag with the permits. Apparently the Wetlands Conservation Board caught wind of our plans to expand the airstrip and well, I don't want to hear it." Marcus roared. "I was assured this would be handled." What am I paying you for if not to steamroll any tree-hugging obstacles between me and my plane? I understand that, sir, Jeff placated. And I assure you, we will resolve this, but it may take a few more weeks. Maybe a month. We can't exactly ignore a cease and desist from the EPA. Marcus hurled his phone at the elevator wall with a strangled scream of rage just as the doors opened into the lobby. Squaring his shoulders and assuming his most imperious glare, he prepared to march through the mass of peons, certain they would part like the Red Sea before his wrath. He had no idea of the sea change he was about to face. The sight of Marcus Bellamy emerging from his private elevator to a blaring chorus of shame. Shame would stay emblazoned in Lena's memory forever. The president's glare was volcanic, and she felt a trickle of fear slide down her spine at the brute force of his disdain. But in the same instant, an inward surge, a voice reminding her that this was the path they had chosen, and there was no room for retreat now. Marcus stalked forward, seemingly intent on walking through the chanting crowd and out to his waiting town car. The protesters parted only minimally, forcing him to bump and shove against a living wall of resistance. It was Olivia, in the end, who found the nerve to step directly into his path, arms folded and chin lifted high. Marcus blinked in surprise at the diminutive woman who dared to block his way. "Going somewhere?" she asked mildly. "Yes, and you are interfering with official corporate business," he snarled. "I suggest you step aside before I call the authorities." "Funny," Rashid interjected, stepping up to Olivia's side. "I was just about to suggest you hold off on your joyride and hear what your employees have to say. Unless you want your official corporate business aired out on the 5 o'clock news." Marcus narrowed his eyes, scanning the increasingly hostile faces surrounding him on all sides. For a split second, Lena thought she saw a flicker of uncertainty dart through his face before it shuddered back into cold command. "I don't take orders from janitors and schoolmarms," he sneered. "Now get out of my way before I take the cost of this little stunt out of your paychecks too." Lena stepped forward then, fists clenched, ready to unleash the speech she had rehearsed in countless late-night sessions. About how they were more than numbers on a spreadsheet, how even the lowest-paid worker was integral to keeping his empire afloat. But before she could draw breath, a new voice cut through the din, authoritative and resonant. "Marcus Bellamy, I'm Agent Lee from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. We have some questions about your recent financials." The crowd parted as two somber-suited agents approached, the taller one holding up a badge. Marcus blanched, a vein pulsing in his forehead. "This is ridiculous," he blustered. "My accounts are impeccable. How dare you accost me based on the lies of these malcontents?" Agent Lee remained impassive. "If your books are clean, this will be a quick conversation. But we have reason to believe you've been funneling Paragon assets into unauthorized personal expenditures. A certain jet purchase, for example." As Marcus sputtered and the agents guided him firmly back towards the elevators, Lena stood in shocked silence. This was an unexpected turn, one they hadn't orchestrated. But as Rashid caught her eye and mouthed, "Sometimes the universe provides," she felt the first real stirrings of hope that change might be possible. In the days that followed, the Paragon offices buzzed with a mixture of anxiety and cautious optimism. With Marcus detained and under investigation, the executive board had hastily appointed an interim president, Julian Gwynn, the unassuming head of R&D who had a reputation for quiet competence and a collaborative spirit. Julia wasted no time in reaching out to Lena and the other organizers. "I believe in Paragon and what we can build together," she told them frankly. "But I also know trust has been broken. I'd like to work with you to repair what's been fractured and create a company culture where everyone feels valued." It was a stunning reversal, and not without its skeptics. But as Julia met with workers, listened to their grievances and ideas with genuine caring, a fragile trust began to grow. She reinstated the pay that Marcus had cut, with back wages, and affirmed the right of employees to organize without interference. Lena found herself thrust into a leadership role, a bridge between her coworkers and this new management paradigm. It was dizzying at times, the weight of responsibility and the learning curve of negotiation. But she thought often of her community, of what they had taught her about resilience and the power of united purpose. With every small victory, a grievance addressed, an inequity corrected, Lena felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Change was coming to Paragon, not through a single dramatic coup, but through the steady, if unglamorous work of rebuilding connection and accountability. Brick by brick, a new foundation was being laid. Months passed in a blur of meetings and breakthroughs, setbacks and solidarities. Lena's days were long, toggling between her official Paragon duties and her growing role as an advocate and organizer. But even as the company slowly transformed, Lena never lost sight of where her true north lay. She still spent evenings with Mila and her makeshift family, plotting out visions for the neighborhood that went beyond corporate profits. Urban gardens, education initiatives, mental health resources, they dreamed of a Riverdale that had access to true and holistic wealth. And bit by bit, those seeds began to sprout. With her newfound platform and connections, Lena was able to channel resources back into her community, supporting the grassroots efforts that had been her bedrock. Paragon employees volunteered time and skills, a symbiotic relationship emerging between company and neighborhood. There were hard days, of course. Days when Marcus's trial splashed lurid headlines across the news, days when old guard managers resisted the new ethos, days when the sheer volume of need felt like it would crush her. But Lena learned to lean on her community, both the one she had been born into and the unlikely one that had taken root under Paragon's fluorescent lights. In their solidarity, she found an unshakable core of strength and purpose. And when the day came that Marcus was led away in handcuffs, his empire of ego crumbled to dust, Lena surprised herself by feeling more pity than triumph. He had had wealth and lost everything. She had begun with nothing and gained a richness she hadn't known was possible. In the end, it was the little things that added up to a revolution. A community garden planted in the courtyard of Paragon headquarters, where executives and janitors chatted over tomato steaks. An education fund that allowed workers to pursue GEDs or coding certifications. A company-wide vote to greenlight a venture that would bring jobs and affordable housing to Riverdale. Lena found herself at the center of a web of relationships that spread far beyond the confines of the office. Her days were spent in boardrooms and church basements alike, stitching together a social fabric that had been left to fray for far too long. There were setbacks and frustrations aplenty. But there was also laughter, the kind that comes from shared struggle and shared triumph. There was the deep satisfaction of watching her coworkers rediscover their own power, their own voices. And there was the quiet joy of walking through her old neighborhood and seeing new life blooming in once empty lots, new hope kindling in the eyes of the children playing on the sidewalks. Lena knew this was just the beginning, that the work of justice and equity was a lifelong endeavor. But she also knew, in a way she had never been certain of before, that she was exactly where she was meant to be, rooted in community and reaching towards collective liberation. On a clear spring morning, Lena stood at the podium of the newly minted Riverdale Community Center, a building that had once been a derelict warehouse and now hummed with the energies of a neighborhood reclaiming its destiny. As she looked out over the sea of faces, her family by blood and by choice, her colleagues turned comrades, her neighbors old and new, Lena felt a swell of emotion clutch her throat. "We stand here today not to celebrate an ending, but a beginning," she said, voice ringing through the sunlit space. "The beginning of a new way of being in community with each other, of valuing our shared humanity above profit margins and power plays. It hasn't been an easy road, and the journey is far from over. But we've shown what can happen when we find the courage to stand together, to leverage our gifts in the service of our shared liberation. Marcus Bellamy tried to break us with greed and disdain. But what he failed to understand is that real strength doesn't come from hoarding wealth or status. It comes from the bonds we build with each other, the care we show even in the face of cruelty, the audacious hope we nurture in the midst of struggle. It comes from love." As the crowd erupted in applause and ululation, Lena caught Mila's eye in the front row. Her best friend was grinning broadly, eyes shining with tears of pride and relief. This is what winning looks like, Lena thought to herself, as she descended from the stage into the arms of her community. Not crushing others under your heel, but lifting each other towards the light. In that moment, Lena knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as they had learned to face everything. Together.